to part 2 of the skirt sloper. Let's pop on over to M119 and pick up where we left off. So here's where we left off. We have, again, our center front, center back, hip line, side seam, waist, and bottom right here that goes down to the ankle. Now I'm going to zoom in on the waistline by using my zoom rectangle tool, which is a click, drag, and it will zoom into the area that you created. And what I'm going to do is check my steps. And the first thing I want to do is mark on the front and back where the waist is going to end. So if you look at our instructions, we're going to do the back waist arc 2. And I'm going to get our calculator up because there's a couple things we have to add. And it is telling us to first take the back waist arc. So let's find out what that measurement is. So our back waist arc, let's find it. Waist arc, back, let's go over here. Remember, we're in column number 2, is 6 3/8. And to convert that into decimal points, since we're going to be adding some things up, that's 6.375. 0.375 is 3/8. And it is also telling us that we need to add a 1/4 inch ease. And 2 inches for the dart intake. So we're going to have 2 inches of dart total. So we are getting 8 5/8. Or 8.625, which we can round up to 8.63. Since we're working with only 2 decimal places, that's perfectly fine. So let's keep that measurement in mind, because that is going to be our front waist arc, again, plus a 1/4 inch ease, plus 2 inches for the dart intake, 8.625. Now our back waist arc is going to span from our center back in toward our side seam, okay? So I'm going to use the point on contour tool, and I'm going to hold the Alt key. And again, I'm measuring from here, which is our previous point, and I'm going to type in that 8, haha. Yes, 8. 8.63. Okay? I'm going to make it a grating point and hit OK. Okay? So this is going to be our waist. And again, our waist, of course, is smaller than our hip because our waist is smaller than our hip. And we're going to place now the points for our darts. Okay? Now, the first dart is going to be placed according to our dart placement measurement. So I'm going to go back to the measurement chart and take a look at where our dart placement measurement is. And it's the same on the front and back, which is 3 1/8, or 3.125. And so I want to be working from my previous point. So I can do 0.13, or I can use the fraction. And we're going to make sure that it's a grating point and hit OK. Now each of our darts is going to be 1 inch. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to go over 1 inch. And again, that's our previous point. Now if you can't take a measurement from here, it's because you didn't make it a grading point. Okay, now it's time for the second dart. Now if we take a look, the distance between our 2 darts on the back is 1 1/4 inches. So my next point is going to be 1 1/4 from that previous point. And I'm going to do my final point 1 inch away because of course both of our darts are 1 inch on the back. So we have 3 1/8 from our center back to our first dart. First dart is 1 inch in width, 1 1/4 in between our 2 darts, and our second dart is going to be another inch. Okay, let's do the front. Now, as we remember, the dart placement from the on the back and the front are the same, so it's going to be another 3 1/8 inch. Now, we're working here from the center back in. Here we're going to work from the center front in. So I'm going to place a point here, and again, this is the measurement I'm interested in, and instead of this now being my previous point that I measure from, it's going to be my next point that I measure from, since we are sort of flipping the direction. Grating, very good. Now the darts on the front are smaller than the darts on the back. They are only 5/8 inch in width. So now my next point is only going to be 5/8 from my previous point. Although the dart distance between the 2 darts is the same. It's the same 1 1/4 inches. Darts are the same width, so here is another 5/8 inch. Okay, now I forgot a point. I was a little hasty, so remember how we did the waist point, where the waist side seam point first here? Forgot to do this on this side, but that's okay, we can do it now. We just have to make sure that I'm measuring from the right point. So remember how I did it first, and I measured from the center back waist point to the side waist point? Well, here I'm going to measure from the center front waist point to the side waist point. This is actually good because what is preventing me from doing that are these guys in here because they're all grading points. So I'm going to right click, go to attributes, and just switch off their grading property very quickly. We can toggle it on and off at will. So it's actually a good demonstration of how we can do this to make this one measurement. So let's calculate this next measurement. So I'm going to bring up the calculator again. And let's take a look at our measurement chart. We're going to start with our front waist arc, which is 6 7/8 or 6.875. And what we need to do is add 1/4 inch for ease. And we also need to add 1 1/4 inches for the dart intake. And that represents the 2 5/8 inch dart together. Oops. There's our 1¼ inch dart intake. And this is our total front waist arc, plus the 1/4 inch ease. So front waist arc, plus the oh, you know what, I added that 1/4 inch twice, didn't I? Let me just do this real quick again. What do they say? Measure twice, draft once, waist arc front, 6 7/8. Oh, this might have been, I think I did it correctly, but just, you know, always good to make sure you're doing the correct thing. Yeah, okay. So 8 3/8 or 8.375. Let's put it in. Make sure it's a grating. And there we are. Now that that's complete, I'm going to go back and toggle these guys back to grating. And there we have it. Now we have everything basically plotted out to finish our draft. We have where the waist should come to. We have where the dart should come to. So we can go ahead and start to sort of finish this up. The last point I really want to make is, well, there's a couple little ones. There's a little adjustments that I'm going to make around here and up here. So let's take a look. The first thing I want to do is, if we take a look at our measurement chart, remember that this is the center back, is I want to look for the difference between the front hip depth and the back hip depth. So this, again, the front hip depth is the distance between the waistline and the hip. And it does change a little bit around the figure. So we set this line to be the front hip depth. So if we remember, this was exactly the front hip depth measurement. So this doesn't need to be changed because this is the center front. So this is the waistline and the hip line. So this is perfectly fine. But if we take a look at our back hip depth, it is, here we go, 7 5/8. And this, so it is 1/8 difference. So if we add that up, this is 3/4 is also 6/8. So this is 1/8 inch smaller than our front hip depth. So what does that mean? That means we have to drop this point 1/8. So I'm going to use my point on contour tool and place a point 1/8 inch below that point right here. And that's 125.125 or 1/8. Let's make it grating. And there we are. Now, moving back to our measurement chart, we will also see that the side hip depth is 1/8 inch larger than our front hip depth. So that means we have to raise these side seam points up 1/8 inch. So I'm going to zoom in real close to show you how to do that. And I'm going to grab my draft tool, and I'm going to start here on this point because I want to measure 1/8 inch up from here. Now I can't use my point on contour tool because I'm not placing a point on the contour. I'm placing it above the contour. So I'm going to draft up to create the point. So I'm going to click there, and it's just asking, is that exactly where you want to click? And yes, it was. Now I'm going to bring it up, hold the Alt key down. And when we do that and click again, we get this measurement box. Now I want to measure not from 0, 0. Remember, that's measuring along our ruler. I want to measure from the last point that I made, which, since I clicked here first, is this point right here. So I want it to go up. I don't want it right or left here. And I want to go up 1/8 inch, which is 125. And I want it to be a perfect right angle up. So I'm going to actually change this to 90. So we get that nice right angle. Even though this said 0 here, let's just make sure everything is perfect. And hit OK. Now you see this rounded this up from 1.125 to 1.3. That's fine. All right. Now I'm going to right click, finish drafting, and you see now we have one point that is 1/8 inch up above that other point. I'm also going to do the same thing over here. A little faster this time. Right click, finish drafting. Okay. So now we really do have all of our points all together. So here we are. It is time for us to finish our draft. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start cutting away some pieces, adding some pieces on just to finish the shaping. Now let's start with our front piece here. Let's finish that up first, and then we'll move on to the back. So I'm going to zoom with my rectangle, and what I would like to do is zoom in a little bit more so I can see those small points. But I want to get between the hip line and this one up here. Okay, so I can see it now. That's good. And I'm going to do a couple things. So I want to cut. Actually, I'm going to draft first. So whenever we're cutting, I'd say fairly this is not complex, but if you're unsure of exactly how it's going to go, it has a little bit of curve to it. It's always good to draft out your points first, or your cuts first. So what we're going to do is, so I know you probably remember back when you did the hip slope, or the skirt sloper in FD25, you would use the hip curve to kind of curve a nice line in between these 2 points to draft it. We're going to use the draft tool to do that and then cut out what's in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start down here, click on that point from the hip and side seam, okie dokie, and draft up. Now I want it to be curved, so I'm going to put in, the trick to this is really to not have too many points. It makes a cleaner and smoother curve the fewer points you put in. So I wouldn't recommend doing any more than maybe 1 or 2 points in between here, but hold shift down as you do. Now if you forget to hold shift down, you can always toggle it back to being a curved point when you are finished in the points property. So right click on the point, and the same place you would toggle it on and off for grating, you can toggle on and off the curve property. Now this is just saying, are you sure you want this exactly here? And when I'm kind of just sort of, moving it around, I'm doing this by eye. I'm not really doing it by measurement. So I'm just going to hit OK. And we can always change it afterwards if it's not exactly what we like. And then I'm going to bring this up here and click on this bottom point here that's right on this flat contour here. So I'm just going to click right there. And yes, I did want it to snap to that point, so that's fantastic. And I'm done with that line. So I'm going to right click and finish drafting. Okay, so there we are. Now that looks pretty good. If it doesn't look good, if you want to change it, you can go ahead and use your move point tool. Click once to move the point, or to pick up the point, and then drop it down. And you can kind of change it, alter it so it looks nice, or you know, it's nice and smooth. It looks okay for me, so I'm just gonna, you know, not move it. But if you wanted to change it, and that's what's nice about using your draft tool before the cut tool, is you can get your lines perfect before you cut. Now that we have it perfect, it's time to cut it. And I'm going to zoom out, because we're going to cut all the way and actually divide these guys in two. So I'm going to start all the way at the bottom. I'm going to use my cut piece tool. Not this guy. This is like it's a Control X function, so it's going to cut the entire piece and put it on the clipboard. This works as our little virtual scissors. So I'm going to use the cut piece tool, keyboard shortcut C. Start way here at the bottom point, and it's a little hard to see because it's really kind of there, but I'm going to cut it all the way there. And let's go all the way up. So straight lines don't need any points in between. So I'm going to go all the way up to here, click. And now remember, we get measurement boxes on our cut tool just like we do on our draft tool, but I don't really need to use it because I've already plotted out all of my lines. So I'm just going to say OK to whatever it says, so long as I am clicking appropriately. Now, what I want to do is click right on the point that I made, and that's going to ensure that where I cut, don't mind these little stray lines, that will happen from time to time when you are going from, you know, scrolling up and scrolling down. They'll disappear once the cut is finished. But again, you want to cut right on the points that you made for the draft line to make sure that what you're cutting is exactly what you drafted. Now once I reach the other end, as I have right here, I'm going to go ahead and get this box, which is our seam attributes. Now we're not going to put seam allowance on our sloper, and even if we were, I'd wait till I'm finished anyways with the whole pattern. The reason we do not put seam allowance on slopers is, remember that it isn't a finished pattern. It's really just meant to be a template that's going to be further manipulated to create our other patterns. And we only put it on our finished patterns. So again, we typically do not put seam allowance on our slopers, and this is going to be no exception. So I'm going to keep that seam width at 0, or you can hit cancel, or if it's at 0, you can hit OK, it doesn't matter. All right. Now we have split it, but I'm not going to move it out quite yet. What I'm going to do is I want to build out the top first. Because remember, we have this little bit that goes up, and I want to incorporate that into our waistline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my draft tool, and I'm going to start at this little point right up here, or sometimes it doesn't like to start from points here. Let's see if it'll work. Sometimes I have to start on the piece, but let's see. Whatever, sure. I clicked on the right point, so that should be fine. And I'm just going to blend it in. You know, it's not much, so I can blend it in before my little darts here, or blend it in right to that dart point right there. Doesn't matter. Just, you know, this would be too short. You don't have to go all the way down here, but if you do, that's kind of fine too. But I think this is fine right here. It's good enough of a blend. And I'm going to click there and say OK. Then right click, finish drafting. Oh, it won't let me do it. Okay, so that was a problem that I anticipated. So to solve that problem, I'm just going to do it in reverse. Sometimes Optitext doesn't like you to draw lines that aren't connected, and this isn't actually part of the piece yet. So let's appease Optitext and start on the actual piece and go up to this point. Okay, there you go. Are you happy? So as you can see, this didn't fill in. That's an additional step, and I'm going to zoom in real close for that. It's hollow, as you can see. So what does that mean? what I need to do is I need to, and these are new tools. So we haven't used these tools yet. I didn't show you these tools, but they're quite easy to use. I need to basically create this shape and then attach it to the pattern right here. So we have created this shape, and Optitext is smart enough to recognize that. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this tool right here, which is our build piece tool. It has a little hammer and a pattern piece next to it. Its keyboard shortcut command is B, and you can also find it down here in the toolbox in build and cut. So build piece tool, I'm going to select it. Looks like a little hammer and another little icon. And I'm going to click in this little triangle. So I want to add this onto the pattern piece. So I'm going to click it, and you can see it fills in with green. Now, so long as the entire thing that you want to create is green, and sometimes you'll have to click multiple times depending on how it's divided, and we'll see that later on, especially when we create facings and things like that. But only took one click at this point, so that's what I want. So I'm going to right click, finish drafting, and it will create a piece. Now what I'm going to do is join this piece to my other pattern piece, just to create this little boop, that little raise in the waist, to create a little bit of a curve in the waistline and make it fit just all that much better. So I'm going to bring it out a little bit whenever I want to join a piece. It's very helpful to create a little bit of space between the pieces that you want to connect, because you can see what's connecting where a little bit better. Hopefully that'll make more sense when we go on to our next tool, which is our join piece tool. Keyboard shortcut J, or as you may have noticed, is right here also in our build and cut menu. So what I want to do is I want to click on the 2 points I want to come together. So these points are going to come together, and these points are going to come together. So either or, doesn't matter. I can click between either of them. You only need to do one set, and whichever one you choose, it doesn't really matter, so long as, again, they are the correct points that are going to come together. So I'm going to use these ones. I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to click on the point that I want that to meet with, which of course is this one. And I'm going to click again. Now we have 2 green lines, and it's very important to pay attention to these green lines. There will be one green line attaching the points that you indicated, so these 2 lines, and that's showing that these are the lines that are going to come together. Great. Now we have another green line that's showing me this is going to come down to here. Now that's not what I want. I don't want this line to attach to this line. I want this line to attach to this line. So what I'm going to do in this little box that popped up, if you noticed, I'm going to change the direction. Okay? Now this is going to, give you the option of how you're going to attach it. Now we see the green line is exactly how I want it. It's attaching this point, or this line segment, and this line segment. So that is what I want. I want these line segments to blend together and these points to match up together. Fantastic. Now, we have the option to move pieces alongside only in this box as well. And what that will do is it will match up and sort of align both of these pieces nice and perfectly, but not actually blend them into one piece. It's not what we want right now, so make sure you don't check this box, but in the future it might be what you want to do. So just keep it in mind. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to zoom out and move this piece out. So let's zoom all. And I'm going to grab my arrow tool so I can move this piece out to show you what it looks like. So here we are. This is our front piece. The only thing we really have to do left is sort of correct it all. But we have done all the drafting. We just have to, again, put in those last little details. But let's finish up on our back piece first. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in my rectangle very closely to our top part here. Now there's 2 things. This is a little bit different than our original piece. Now, our original piece, we just had to blend in the kick up from right here, which I hope is still there. Looks like it should be. Sometimes it's so small you have to zoom in. But we also have to trim this off. So remember, we dropped this center back waist point. So what I'm going to do, let's zoom in real close, is I'm going to cut away this little bit to drop down our waist, and also the same thing we did on the front to add in our waist. So I'm going to use the cut piece tool. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is fairly square, because remember, this is going to be an on-fold line. So I'm going to square it out first, and I'm basically just going to square it out by doing a little bit in and make sure it doesn't go up or down. Make sure this is, we can snap that down to a nice 0. Doesn't matter how far, just do a little bit so you get this nice square angle here at the center back. And then we're going to go in, and I can blend it into sort of the first dart point right here. Okay? Now we have this little has been cut off. Again, we don't want any seam allowance. So I can now take this, I'm going to grab my arrow tool, click on this piece, and hit delete. And that has cut away our little point disappeared. I wonder why that happened. Sometimes, and you'll find this unfortunately, Optitext can be a little bit screwy. But no matter, because I can put it back, and even better, I can do the whole thing all in one. So remember how we had it go up and then we blended it back in? I can really actually do that all in one go. So let's do that all in one go. So I'm going to click this, okay? All right. I'm just starting there, so I don't need to type in any measurements. It's exactly where I want to start. It clicked and snapped to that point perfectly. I'm going to raise it up. Remember, it was at 1/8 inch. I raised it up. So I want this to be 125 at a perfect 90-degree angle with no distance right or left. Okay? Now that's what we did before, but instead of ending it, I'm going to continue on and draft the line down to, we can say this dart point right here. Okay? Okay. Now it's snapped to the point, so I don't have to really do any measurements, so just snap point. So basically this one, the snap point measurement, I don't think I've really gone over it. It's snapped to this point because I clicked on it, and it's saying 0 in all these boxes because it's directly on the point that I clicked on. So it's 0 distance away. So if I wanted to change that from this point, I could type that in, but of course I don't want to. Okay. Now I can right click finish drafting, and I get that little bump up right there. So let's go ahead and build it. Right click, finish drafting, and let's join it. Again, I'm going to move it up a little bit just so I can see what's going on. And let's do these points now. Again, that's not what I want. I want this line and this line. So I'm going to change direction. Okay? All right. There we go. Now let's do our cut. Now we don't have quite as big a cut because I've already done the majority of the side seam. So let's zoom out a little bit. A little bit more. A little bit more. A little bit more. Okay, a little bit more. Alright, that's good. And basically I just want a cut from this line, or this point right here, that bottom that is actually on line here, and have it come down from here. Okay, so let's draft it first like we did before. I'm going to start here. Okie dokie. Have a nice little curve. I'm going to put the curve, the point kind of in the same, so I want it to be, you know, relatively the same sort of arc as before. Holding shift to curve it and bringing it to this point. That looks pretty good. and right click Finish Drafting. Now we're just going to cut along that line. And we'll start here, although you can start from the top too, doesn't really matter. And you're going to curve your cut lines the same way as you do with the draft tool. So hold Shift when you make those points to make a curve. And no seam allowance. Okay? Now we can get rid of this sort of middle wedge, as we don't need it any longer. And we have our nice front and back pieces. Okay, so let's finish it up. And actually, I think I'm going to save the finishing for our last lesson, our part 3. So I'm going to save. And we'll do that. It'll be a fairly short, easy lesson, but I don't want to put too much in any one. So, okay, I'll see you in the next lesson.